I'm Bob Van Bargen, President Emeritus of the Armed Forces Heritage Museum, and your host for this series featuring the service of veterans. In today's video, you will travel with Arthur SELTZER as he leaves Omaha Beach to fight his way across France and Belgium and into the homeland of Germany. He will relate his combat experience and put a first-person view into your understanding of battles of World War II in Europe. I draw your attention to Arthur's story of the dollar bill. It will give you a perspective on the human price paid in the water and on the sands. Off the beach and through the buff and onto the...
Well, once we got off the beach and got ourselves together, things were a little bit better as we were headed towards our next place that we were supposed to go to. Before I got off the beach, I found the sergeant who was in charge of our group, and he told me that only he and I were the only two that survived out of the 36 people. Before we went over the side of the ship, the sergeant in charge of our landing craft came over to me and he says, all the men in our landing craft, for good luck, are going to sign a dollar bill. And we'd like you to join us. And I said I'd be more than welcome to. And I took out a dollar bill, and I have 29 signatures on that dollar bill now. And I show that dollar bill wherever I speak.
You mentioned before about having to find a place where your radio would be most effective. How'd you do that, and what dangers were
Well, first of all, I knew, one, that we were not going to set the radio up on the beach. We were going to use the portable stuff that we had. But when I did see my vehicle come ashore, I knew that we were going to be in good shape. And the first place we put that up, we would go into a small town, and then we go outside the town to a farm somewhere, and that's where we would put the antenna out. The antenna was roughly about 9 feet up in the air. It was a regular pole with the antenna equipment on the top, so you had to have a big field. The only problem was, once we put that antenna up, the Germans could zero in on us because we were sending signals and they could pick up where we were. So again, in one way it was good to operate the radio, but in the other breath, the bombs coming in were pretty rough at that time.
You had to keep moving.
You had to keep moving, and you couldn't be stationary too long. Again, now as I said before, on the beach, normally in war today, there's always a second program that you can back up on shore and reform and then go ahead again. We could not back up on Omaha Beach because we would be in the water. So we only had one program, and that was to get off Omaha Beach. And the only way was to go forward.
As you moved through Europe, and you had several others, St. Lo, Bastogne, Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. Tell us what happened there.
Well, the first place was St. Lo, and when I say St. Lo, we had to take St. Lo for many reasons. Our food and ammunition was coming from way down south, and it took quite a while to get there. But if we could take Antwerp, where the battleships could come in, we could get our ammunition and food right away. So therefore, it was very important that we hold on to that ground, and that's where Hitler decided he would form his group, and that's where the Battle of the Bulge took place. During the Battle of the Bulge, it was so darn cold from snow, we had not received our winter equipment yet, and again, we were cold, and I mean cold. And again, when you wanted to go to the bathroom, the only thing you could do was try to dig a hole in the snow and ice, and naturally, do the best you could. During the Battle of the Bulge, we were stationed in the forest, and the forest was loaded with trees. I mean trees. And again, to one degree, it was a saving for us, because when the shells would land in the forest, the only problem was, instead of bullets going into you, pieces from the tree would go into your body. And naturally, you had to pull those pieces out. That's where I was thrown into the air, and when it came down, I landed on my back, and I thought I was deaf because I couldn't hear nothing. The medics came running over to me, and they kept on saying to me, you got to go to the hospital. And I kept on telling them I couldn't go. I had to operate the radio equipment. And I told them I would be okay. And they insisted, and I kept on pushing them off. And all of a sudden, I had a ringing in my ear, and my hearing came back. And I told them my hearing came back, and they said, you still should go to the hospital. I said, I'll go later on. And that's where most of the damage was done for me, was at the Battle of the Bulge. From the Battle of the Bulge, after we took Bastogne, and again, that's where the story of Nuts came about. Again, the commanding officer from the 101st Airborne was surrounded at the Battle of the Bulge. And the Germans sent him a letter telling him to surrender. And he, in his own wisdom, wrote a note back to him, and he said to the general, whoever was in charge of the German army, that nuts to you. And the German people in the service there who were surrounding us couldn't figure out what that meant. When we came back, my wife and I had to retrace my steps, and we went up to the Ardennes, and we went up to the top where they have a store there. You can find any kind of nut you want to find. They sell them all up there. So that was the only thing that was a little bit funny that happened during that Battle of the Bulge. From there we moved on. We crossed the Rhine River. We came up to a small town, and there's where we got to meet some of the German people, and they were very nice to us. We came up to a concentration camp called Dachau, and we were given strict orders that during the war, if we came across an army war camp, a German war camp, that we were to get our soldiers out and get them back into active duty. That was what we were to do. Well, when we left the town we were in Germany, and we were headed towards the Elbe River, we came across this camp called Dachau concentration camp. That was the first time that any of us knew about concentration camps. And I want to tell you, the first time I saw that, it was enough to turn your stomach. There were people there in no clothes at all, and half of them were starving. And what we did, which was the wrong thing for us to do, we took all the K rations out of our vehicle and start to feed them K rations. Well, what happened, their stomachs were not used to that, and they were throwing up. Naturally, we got a hold of Eisenhower, and we asked him to come to the camp, and which he did. And when he saw that camp, he made the mayor of the town the next day bring all the people up to the camp. And he made them walk around in twos. And he made them pick up the bodies and lie them in the cemetery. And the way they made a cemetery, they took a bulldozer and just level a piece of straight ground, and then they would lay them in there and then cover them up with the dirt. Before they covered them up, they used to put the white stuff on top of them to help decay the body. And that's the way they'd be buried. And he gave everybody, all the soldiers, order, if you see anybody dragging a body, you tell me, and they will be double what they have to do. And he was very strong in that situation. From there, we moved on to meet the Russian army. And as everybody knows, the Russians and the President of the United States had an agreement. And the agreement they had was, since the Russians were fighting with the Germans and were almost wiped out, the Russians were given the privilege to go into Berlin first. And we were to meet the Russians at the Elbe River, which was not too far from the concentration camp that we liberated. When we got to the Elbe River, we came upon the ships that brought the soldiers in, and I believe, without a doubt, there were more women soldiers from Russia than there were men soldiers on that ship. And they were all, without a doubt, they were the best drinkers I ever met. They could drink liquor faster than you could think about it. And they were known as big drinkers, and they were. But it was really great to meet them, because when we met them at the Elbe River, we knew that the war for us was over. And we knew that we had finally survived, which was the worst war that anyone at my age could be in.
Arthur Seltzer's story is just one of many that relate what happened in Europe and the fall of the Third Reich. Arthur came home after liberating the Dachau concentration camp. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his actions. Veterans returned from the war and took advantage of the GI Bill to advance their education. They went to work and built a booming economy. I was particularly taken by Arthur's description of how he found work upon returning to Philadelphia. Now, take a look at this. You'll enjoy it.
And I'm walking down the street for a minute, and I see all electronic places. And I said, this can't be the place I'm supposed to be. And I realized, holy guys, I looked up at the sign, it says Arch Street. And as I look down the street, I see a man coming out of the store with his flags and all, and eating a sandwich. So I went up to him and said, what's going on? He says, they're having a grand opening here. He says, go in, they're giving out sandwiches and soda and all. You know, and I had on civilian clothes. He didn't know I was even a soldier or anything. So I went in. And as I went in, and I got a sandwich and a soda, and I'm eating, I looked down on the floor, and across the whole bottom of the floor is all this radio equipment I operated during the war. And I said to the man, where did you get that equipment? He says, I bought it in surplus. Why? I said, I operated this during the war. Meanwhile, a customer came in, and he came over to me, and he said to me, can you tell me about that radio equipment? I said, yeah, I operated during the war. The only problem with it, you have to put a big antenna high in the sky. He says, I have it because I'm a radio amateur. So I said, oh, then you know what to do. He says, yeah. He said, well, good, I'll take one. I said, I don't work here. I just dropped in to get a sandwich and a soda. So I said, well, go over the counter, and somebody will wait on you. They'll be glad to take your money. Well, after that, the man came up to me, and he started to talk to me, and he said to me, you're going to come to work for me. And he says, you'll enjoy working here. I says, not me. I enjoy what I'm doing right now. He says, what are you doing? I says, nothing. I says, I'm getting $52, was it $22 for 52 weeks for doing nothing. He said, well, I'm going to pay you more. So anyway, make a long story short, I come home and I said to my father, boy, did you raise a dumb son? He says, now what did you do? I said, I'm getting $22 a week for doing nothing. I took a job for $25 a week, and I got to work on Saturdays also. And my father said, you did the right thing. And I did. I was with this company. That was the only company I ever worked for.
As Arthur says, it was the only job he ever had. What he does not say is that the Army-Navy storefront that he started to work in grew to become the largest electronic distributorship on the East Coast, and that he retired as Vice President of Marketing and Sales. Furthermore, Arthur became a leading figure with the Jewish war veterans, serving as New Jersey Department Commander and a primary motivator in establishing the many human and community service programs that fine organization continues to provide today. He was an amazing man. In our next serial, we will follow the training and combat experience of a lead crew bomber pilot with the 8th Air Force in England during the Second World War. Life expectancy of a bomber crew to complete the required 30-plus missions was about 20% in the early days of the war. Losses were very high. Retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Bob Hansen will share what it was like to fly the B-24 in combat. Stay tuned. And may I remind you, if you appreciate these videos, I encourage you to make a donation to support the program. Your contributions in any amount can be made easily at the Armed Forces Heritage Museum website, www.afhmus.org.